6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And booster ignition, liftoff of Space Shuttle Discovery.
On July 9, 1962, the United States detonated a nuclear weapon in space. The explosion was 400 kilometers above Earth, and nobody knew what would happen. They called it Operation Starfish Prime, and it would change space forever. The Cold War had pushed humanity to the edge of madness. This is the story of the day we nuked the sky. By 1962, the United States and Soviet Union had already detonated hundreds of nuclear weapons. But both superpowers were running out of places to test on Earth. The arms race wasn't slowing down. It was reaching upward. Scientists proposed something radical. What if we tested a bomb in the upper atmosphere? The answer would come in the form of a missile called Thor. High-altitude testing wasn't entirely new. Both nations had already pushed bombs higher and higher. Starfish Prime was part of a larger series called Operation Fishbowl. But Starfish would be different. It would be the biggest test of them all. The warhead was the W-49, with a yield of 1.4 megatons. That's roughly 100 times the power of the Hiroshima bomb. The target altitude was 400 kilometers, directly above Johnston Atoll. Johnston Atoll was remote, isolated, and the perfect place to hide a nuclear launch. At that altitude, there is almost no air. The explosion would behave unlike anything seen before. Some scientists warned that the blast could damage satellites and create artificial radiation belts. The military pressed forward anyway. The Cold War didn't wait for caution. Johnston Atoll is one of the most isolated places on Earth. Hundreds of personnel lived there, preparing for a test that would shake the heavens. The Thor Missile sat on its pad, loaded with the most powerful warhead ever launched into space. Telemetry tracked everything. Cameras pointed skyward. The world was about to witness something unprecedented. The countdown began. 9 minutes to midnight, July 9, 1962. The Thor was an intermediate-range ballistic missile, originally designed to carry nuclear warheads to Moscow. Now it had a different mission, not to strike an enemy, but to test the unknown. The rocket carried its deadly cargo straight up, not across the ocean. It climbed through the atmosphere, past the stratosphere, into the ionosphere. At 400 kilometers, the warhead separated. The timer reached 0. In the control room, scientists held their breath. They had theories, they had models, but no human had ever seen a nuclear explosion in the vacuum of space. The missile was now beyond their control. Whatever happened next was up to physics. Radio contact remained strong. Tracking confirmed the warhead was exactly on target. Then, at 11 minutes past midnight, the signal was sent. The warhead armed. From Hawaii, the rocket appeared as a bright star climbing through the night sky. Tourists and locals watched, unaware they were witnessing the prelude to an artificial sun. Some thought it was a meteor. Others assumed it was a routine satellite launch. Nobody on that beach knew that a 1.4 megaton bomb was about to detonate above them. 3 seconds. 2. 1. The detonation command was executed. What happened next defied every expectation. In Hawaii, 1,400 kilometers away, the sky turned from night to day in an instant. The flash was visible from Hawaii to Samoa. It was brighter than any natural phenomenon. In space, without atmosphere, the fireball was a perfect sphere. No mushroom cloud, just pure expanding energy. The explosion released gamma rays, X-rays, and an electromagnetic pulse that would travel at the speed of light. The fireball expanded to over 7 kilometers in diameter within seconds. But the real spectacle came moments later. An artificial aurora that wrapped around the equator. Charged particles from the blast slammed into Earth's magnetic field, creating curtains of light. These auroras weren't just local. They followed Earth's magnetic field lines for thousands of kilometers. Pilots reported seeing the aurora from their cockpits, thousands of kilometers from the blast. In Samoa, south of the equator, the sky turned blood red. But the light show was only the beginning. The real damage was invisible. In Hawaii, streetlights went dark. Circuit breakers tripped across the islands. Telephone lines failed. The electromagnetic pulse had struck with the force of a lightning bolt across an entire state. And Hawaii was 1,400 kilometers away from the blast. The pulse had traveled that far in milliseconds. The electromagnetic pulse induced currents in every conductor it touched. Power grids, telephone lines, and radio equipment all suffered damage. In 1962, electronics were primitive, yet even they couldn't withstand the pulse. Military radar stations were blinded. For precious minutes, nobody knew if this was a test or an attack. If a similar weapon were detonated over a modern city today, the damage would be catastrophic. But the worst damage happened in silence, high above Earth. At the time of Starfish Prime, there were roughly 24 satellites in orbit. Within hours, 1/3 of all satellites were damaged or destroyed. Telstar 1, the world's first commercial communications satellite, was killed by American radiation. 7 satellites died that day, victims of a test their creators never imagined would reach them. But the most lasting effect was something nobody fully predicted. The explosion created an artificial radiation belt that wrapped around Earth. This artificial belt was far more intense than the natural Van Allen belts. It persisted for months, making certain orbital altitudes lethal to astronauts and satellites alike. The belt took months to decay. Some particles remained trapped for years. Starfish Prime helped push the world toward the Partial Test Ban Treaty of 1963. Today, with thousands of satellites in orbit, a similar test would be unthinkable. In 1962, losing 7 satellites was a tragedy. Today, it would be an economic catastrophe. Operation Starfish Prime proved that space is not separate from Earth. What we do up there affects everything down here. We nuked the sky once. The scars remain. Let's make sure we never do it again.